Have you ever wondered why we make the financial choices we do? Why one minute we're playing it super safe and the next we're taking a massive risk? Well, today we're going to dive into the hidden psychology that really drives our decisions. It's a revolutionary idea called prospect theory.
So let me just start by asking you a question. When you're making a financial choice, I don't know, maybe spending or investing a few $100, are you really thinking about your total net worth? Your house, your car, your savings, the whole shebang? Because for 2.5 centuries, the absolute bedrock of economics was built on the assumption that you do. That we're all these rational calculators just weighing the final outcome for our total wealth. The only problem? That idea is just fundamentally wrong. To see why, we first have to understand the old model. It was elegant, it was simple, but as we're about to see, it was missing a key part of what actually makes us human. This was Bernoulli's big idea, and it was called expected utility theory. It basically said that when you're faced with a choice, you don't really care about the immediate gain or loss. Nope. All that matters is which option leaves you with more total wealth in the end. It's a neat theory, for sure, but it has this one massive blind spot.
And this is where Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky saw the crack in the foundation. They saw economists studying these tiny little choices, like choices over pennies, and trying to make these grand conclusions about the utility of wealth. It just seemed absurd. They realized that economists were suffering from what they called theory-induced blindness, basically unable to see what was right there in front of their faces.
And this flaw becomes crystal clear the second we test it. So, let's just look at a couple of simple choices.
Okay, first up, think about this. Would you take a guaranteed $900, or would you gamble on a 90% chance to get $1,000? Go ahead, pick one. Most people, they lock in the sure thing. All right, now what about this one? A guaranteed loss of $900 or a 90% chance to lose $1,000. Suddenly, the tables turn. Most people feel a little more adventurous, and they take the gamble.
You see, this simple little pair of questions just revealed our first big psychological twist. When we're talking about gains, we hate risk. But the second we're faced with only bad options, we become risk seekers, trying to avoid that sure loss. This kind of behavior just doesn't fit into that old model at all.
But it gets even stranger. The old theory wasn't just missing how we feel about gains and losses, it was completely missing the power of the starting line, what psychologists called the framing effect.
All right, new scenario. Imagine I hand you a crisp $1,000 bill. It's yours, no strings attached. Now, I offer you another choice. Take another $500 for sure, or we can flip a coin for a chance to win another $1,000. What do? Most people take the sure $500.
Okay, let's reset. This time I hand you $2,000. Then I give you a different kind of choice. You can lose $500 for sure, or you can flip a coin with a 50% chance to lose $1,000. What happens here? Well, most people choose to gamble.
And here is the absolutely mind-blowing part. From a final wealth perspective, those two scenarios are exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the story I told you, the frame.
If you just look at the math, the final outcomes are identical. The sure thing always leaves you with $1,500. The gamble always gives you a 50-50 shot at either $1,000 or $2,000. So, according to that old theory, our choice should be the same in both cases. But it isn't. Our decision depends entirely on whether we think the story is about a gain or a loss. So the old theory is clearly broken. What replaces it? Well, that brings us to the new model, the theory that actually explains all these weird quirks of human nature. It's called prospect theory, and its core idea is actually really simple. We don't think in terms of our absolute wealth. We think in terms of changes, gains, and losses from whatever we consider to be our neutral starting point. So prospect theory really stands on three main pillars. First, there's a reference point. Everything is judged as either a gain or a loss from where we start. Second, diminishing sensitivity. The emotional kick gets smaller the further it is from that starting point. So the difference between, say, $900 and $1,000 feels way smaller than the difference between $100 and $200. And third, the most powerful one of all, is loss aversion.
This S-shaped curve is basically the perfect symbol for prospect theory. You can actually see diminishing sensitivity where those curves start to flatten out. But look at the center point. The curve on the loss side is way steeper than the curve on the gain side. And that, right there, is loss aversion in action.
So how much steeper are we talking? Well, studies have estimated that psychologically, a loss hurts about twice as much as an equivalent gain feels good. The pain of losing $100 is about as intense as the joy of gaining $200.
It all boils down to this incredibly powerful and simple summary. Losses just loom so much larger in our minds than gains do. It's this asymmetry that's probably been wired into us by evolution, right? Where threats are just a lot more urgent than opportunities.
Now, prospect theory was a seismic shift, a total earthquake in how we understand decision-making. But, like any great theory, it's not the complete picture. It has its own blind spots, too.
For example, it really struggles with the emotion of disappointment. Winning nothing when you had a 90% chance to win $1 million feels like a huge loss, but the theory just calls it a zero-value non-event. It also doesn't really account for regret, that unique kind of pain of knowing you could have chosen better.
But even with these limitations, the damage to the old way of thinking was done. As economists Robin and Thaler provocatively declared, the idea that we make choices based on our final wealth, expected utility theory, well, it's an X-hypothesis. It's over.
So, what this all means is that our choices aren't just these rational calculations. They're stories. They're stories we tell ourselves about gains and losses from a starting line that's constantly shifting. So the real question is, now that you know the story your mind is telling, what will you decide differently?